We've made quite a few guides about laning before, but not many about the little but important plays that you can make to get a lot more out of your lanes. Today we'll talk about how impactful positioning yourself correctly and trading at the correct times in lane is. Before we start, what do you think is the easiest mid lane matchup? During the laning stage, regardless of whether you play core or support, your focus is on the creeps, and you generally want to get as many of them as possible. But we can't ignore your opponents who'll try to stop you from taking that farm. In order to make sure you get the most out of your lane, you should always posture so that you can do what you want to do immediately when you get the chance. When you're playing core, for example, your primary job in the lane is to get all the last hits. Beyond that, you can also work towards shutting down your opponent in the lane, and eventually start to farm the jungle near the lane to get some extra farm out of it. How good your matchup is usually determines how much of that you can actually do. If you're strong in the lane, you're generally expected to play aggressive and shut your opponents down as well as farm, and this is where we'll start. The core concept behind playing aggressive is to not let the weaker opponent get anything for free. You can't always deny all the creeps in the lane, but you need to make sure that they pay for the last hits they take. The trick is always to be in position to do that, and that's by paying attention to how much health creeps have. If a creep has lower health, start walking towards your opponent to make sure they have to pay a lot of health to get that creep. If you're out of position, just hang back. You might get 1 to 2 fewer hits in, or you might even let them get the last hits for free. So overall, if a creep hits low health, walk at the opponent rather than trying to deny it, and start hitting them. If they back off, you get a free uncontested deny. If they try to get the creep, they lose a lot of health. There's one minor issue with this. Your priority is still last hitting, so what happens if one of your and their creeps hit low health at the same time? The best you can do here is to trade last hit for last hit usually, which is something you want to avoid if you're stronger. The solution here is to prevent this from happening in the first place by attacking one of them before they're in danger of being denied. There are of course more problems that should get your attention, especially if you aren't playing mid, since your lane will be 2v2 in most games. You also need to take into account what your support is doing. If he needs your help to contest the pull camp, then stand close to it in case you need to help him. You see the offlaner leaving the lane to kill your support? Follow him a little bit to see if you can fight. Reacting once your support hits low HP is always too late. Now all that doesn't mean you should fight all the time. It means you should always be ready to fight in case you need to. However, there's one more even bigger concern. You aren't always in a favored matchup. So how should you play the same lane from the weaker side? First off, the approach when you were stronger was to not let the enemy take anything for free. This time around, it's your goal to find ways to farm without fighting. The simplest and most effective way is to use creep aggro to drag the creeps back, and most of you will know how to do that. So what else can you do? 1. Don't be within range of your opponent unless you want to hit a creep right now. Stay a bit back, only move in to get the CS. If you can't find an opening to get last hits if you just sit back, then another approach is to accept that you're going to get hit a lot and try to kill as many creeps as you can while being hit, then buy more regen. In a similar way, since the one reason you can't free farm is the opponent shutting you down, if they are far away, kill creeps as quickly as you can. This way, anytime they make a mistake or chase your support around, you can use that space to get the last hits that would otherwise be denied. Some lanes can take this approach to kill creeps quickly in the next step and use their abilities to push in creep waves really fast. This way, you can get all the last hits, let the enemy farm on their side, and pull a camp while they're busy. Off lanes that are weak at fighting but have good abilities to push like Darkseer play this strategy very often. When you're playing support, your job is to help your cores get the most CS they can. Since you aren't pressured to take the last hits yourself, that means you have a lot more time to fight or mess around with the jungle camps around you. Here we'll talk about how to use that extra time. First off, when you feel like you're in a good matchup on your lane, you should try to fight as often as possible. Since you aren't limited by having to focus on last hits, you can spend your time punishing the enemy core for taking last hits or fighting the support for control of the pull camps. That means for the vast majority of the laning stage, you should be positioned to the side of the camp which is closer to the hard camp. Anytime someone tries to come to you, start fighting them. Similar to what you would do on cores, punish the enemies for trying to take last hits by posturing close to low health creeps and hitting them as they walk up to get it. One important thing to keep in mind is that all your aggression will naturally shove the wave out, so it's extremely important that you're ready to pull the camp once you do push. To prevent the enemies from contesting you, try to aggressively fight them 5 to 6 seconds before you need to pull to zone them away. Another aspect that's different from playing core is that dying as the support isn't nearly as damaging for your team, so you can push your limits a lot further. Dying to get a kill for your core and giving them an advantage in the lane is quite often a good play. Just make sure not to die for nothing. That little sidetrack is important for us because it ties into the next point. How much regen should you get? Generally, I recommend you buy as much as you need to play aggressive. For example, you shouldn't sit behind your core as Lina because you're low health. Just fetch that salve. If you can't get regen for some reason, no problem. You should keep fighting on low health. What really matters is that your death gets you a good trade. Sometimes as a support, you'll face a lane that you cannot ever fight favorably, even if you buy a lot of regen or play suicidal. These are the lanes where you'll have to play defensive, but that doesn't mean that you can stop fighting. If you let the enemies do what they want, you'll lose the lane horribly. So if you can't ever take a good fight, how or when should you fight anyways? The key is to fight for specific important resources in the lane, rather than just fighting when you get the chance. Losing trades means you just lose more health than the opponent after all, not that you cannot trade. Overall, you can think of your health as a resource to trade away for things in the lane. For example, stopping the enemy from pulling their camps is something worth trading away your health for. Similarly, securing ranged creeps your cores cannot get is also worth some health or mana. Try to find what you really need to fight for in your matchup and only fight at those times. Another way you can trade is when they focus your core player. Every time the aggressive lane tries to hit your core, you should be in position to hit back. This sounds really simple, but it's really important to not let them get away with harassing your core for free. Every hit counts. Another completely different approach is to get the farm out of the lane without fighting for it. In the core section, we mentioned one popular approach before, which was pushing in the lane. Supports, mainly position 4, have another tool in their box, dragging the creeps. The goal is to aggro the enemy creep wave right before their T1 tower and pulling them to your tower to meet the next wave. This way you can avoid fighting and just let your offlaner catch up. Position 5 players have an option that's similar, and that's spamming single pulls. What this does is let your carry farm under the tower undisturbed, then pushes out the lane, allowing you to pull again, and so on. This way you won't get as much farm, and the offlaner is going to have an easy time, but that farm will be easier to get. Use these strategies if you have a super weak lane and if you have a hard time fighting at all. That's gonna be it for now, and I hope you found today's guide useful. The purpose of this video was to give you guys some ideas on how little mechanical things can have a huge impact in your laning stage. Have fun in your matches, and hopefully you'll win more of your lanes.